Now we're going to learn how to make a quick sauce. It's a little bit deceiving because it's not really that quick. Yet it's something we developed at the French Laundry when we first opened our restaurant there. We had a very small kitchen with a very small stove space. We had 10 burners. So we had to make sauces every day, and we had to figure out a way to do that. So this is the result of a small kitchen working every day to produce sauces. In front of me, I have some chicken bones, chicken necks, chicken backs, kind of the same bones that we did our chicken stock with. We're going to make a brown chicken sauce, but we can also do that with lamb bones, or veal bones, or duck bones, or venison bones. This is the beauty about making a sauce like this, because we have our workhorses here. We have our light chicken stock, we have our veal stock, which helps give the volume and the viscosity to these different types of flavors that we're dealing with here. We have mirepoix. Of course, we have our tomatoes, which have a lot of water in them, and we're going to show you how the process of glazing and deglazing goes again. And then our little sachet, which has our parsley in it, thyme, some garlic, and then onions, carrots, and leeks in our mirepoix. I'll go ahead and get this going. The amount of oil that you put in it is irrelevant because, as you saw with all our chicken stock, we skimmed all of the impurities off, but we also skimmed the fat off. In the chicken stock, we took it and kept it as a schmaltz. In this case, we'll skim all the fat off. So don't be afraid to use an abundance of oil. The more oil you have, the better these are going to brown. And that's the whole thing, pan roasting, browning these bones so they get that quality, that roasted quality, and add that flavor, in this case, roasted chicken, to the roasted chicken sauce. I'd rather have too much oil than not enough. So probably about a 1/4 inch in there. Of course, remember, as oil heats, it expands as well. Our burner is on high at this point. Now, I want you to be careful because there's a lot of liquid in here, and we want to be careful when we're adding our bones to our cookware. The other thing to remember is we don't want to crowd our cookware. We want to make sure that there's some space in between. We don't want them stacked up on top of one another. Remember, if there's too much in there, the cookware, won't recuperate the heat fast enough and then result in moisture release from the bones, and you'll start to see it almost boil. And that's not what we want. We don't want it boiling. We want the oil hot enough oil. We want just the appropriate amount of bones in there so that everything, the pan recuperates quickly. The bones are starting to sear immediately, and there's none of that excess moisture loss that creates that boiling effect that sometimes we see. We're going to use a flat-sided spatula or wooden spoon, if you will, because again, we want to be able to remove what we glaze. Glazing is important because we can't deglaze unless we glaze. And this time we're going to learn how to deglaze with some vegetables. In this case, tomatoes, because they have a high water content. So again, you can see some wafts of smoke. I'm going to start to go ahead and put my bones in there. Again, be careful. There's some fat on here, there's moisture on here. You get a lot of violent splattering in the beginning. So if you're not comfortable putting your hands in there, then just go ahead and take your spatula and place them in there, okay? And you can take your time with this. In fact, the longer it takes you to put your bones in there, the more time the cookware has to recuperate that heat that's lost by adding these. Once again, if these are tempered, in other words, if they're at room temperature, then it's also very, very helpful. We always talk about tempering everything that we're cooking. Now, my tendency is to move them around now, but I'm going to be patient. Patience is very important. I want to give them a chance to start to sear. Even though I see some of them are out of place, I'm still going to wait. do have a little bit of splatter there. So again, some of you at home may have those splatter screens. It's fine. Put it on top. Prevent that splatter of your stovetop from having to clean it. Adjust some of those things now. As they cook, they'll shrink. They'll shrink because some of the fat that's on there is rendered off, but they'll also shrink because they're losing moisture. So there'll be more surface area in a few moments once they start to really roast. Again, listening to that noise, it's calmed down somewhat. When I turn them over, though, it may, again, have an increase or a more violent reaction because there's still moisture on top of this. Again, I like to listen to my food. Many times you'll have a roasted chicken and you'll have the carcass left over. I really recommend you cutting that up in 1x1 pieces, 2x2 pieces, putting that in a storage, a plastic storage bag, maybe doubling the plastic storage bag depending how long you're going to have that in the freezer, and putting them in the freezer because you could add that. You're making a chicken stock or chicken sauce. You can use those roasted chicken bones as well. You can use those roasted chicken bones that you've saved over a period of time also for a stock. Now just pay attention to this noise that you're going to hear in a moment. I don't want to turn it too quickly, but I want you to be paying attention. And the aromas that are coming off that are very important. Don't stick your face in there to smell it. You can smell it from here because it does splatter. But I can smell that roasted chicken coming up, that beautiful, fresh roasted chicken. Almost like it was coming out of the oven. And that's what we want. We want to have that aroma, but that aroma is going to result in the flavor that we have in our sauce. Pay attention. Did you hear that increase in noise? Patience again, and we're going to continue to let that brown. So you can see here, right, the heat is actually bringing the moisture out. So you have a little bit of blood there, a little bit of water there, and that's what we're trying to eliminate is that moisture. And then glaze the bottom of our sauce spot at the same time. You can see the necks are really starting to get the appropriate color. We've got a few backs here which are a little bigger, which will cook a little more. Just positioning them differently. Once I'm ready, I'm going to pour off the fat. When we talked about how much fat we put in the beginning, it doesn't really matter because we're going to pour most of it off. The splattering is considerably diminished as the moisture continues to evaporate. Remember, this is not really chicken fat. This is oil, probably 80% oil, maybe 20% chicken fat in there. So, you know, I wouldn't save this and use it for anything else. So we're continuing to get some nice glaze. You can see that right here. Beautiful glaze there. And we don't want to disturb that at this moment because remember, we're going to pour this oil out. If we disturb it and release it from the bottom of the cookware, the pan, then it's going to go into the oil, and we don't want that to happen. Again, the flavor of your roasted chicken sauce is right here. It's right here in the bones. These are some building blocks which will support the flavor. Kind of think of it as you're a carpenter. This is your foundation to your house. Here, these are the studs, the wooden studs or the metal studs that support the walls. These are your sheetrock that add to that support. And then, of course, you're going to paint it with whatever finishing components that we have in terms of whether it's a vegetable or an herb or a spice. So I'm going to turn off my fire and let it calm down for a moment. Be prepared here. I'm being cautious. Push everything over to the side that you're going to strain to. Okay, so it doesn't roll and tumble down there and somehow hurt you. Okay? Lift it off very carefully. 2 hands, you see. Now I'm going to let it just rest for a minute. I'm going to grab this just in case. And I'm just going to go ahead and strain off most of that oil that we had. Not all of it, but most of it. Okay? The rest we'll remove later on by skimming. Now we're going to start our deglazing process. So the first thing that we're going to deglaze with, as I mentioned, is going to be our tomatoes. Listening to that, fire it back on. Very nice Maillard browning, or as we refer to it as caramelization. Okay, tomatoes would be our first deglazing ingredient. You hear that? That's again the liquid from the tomato coming out as soon as it hits the heat. But look what it's doing to the bottom of the pan. So I'm able to scrape, use the water, you see all that water there, from the tomato to help deglaze all those beautiful flavors that have been glazed on from the chicken bones. So the bottom of your pan you should be cleaning it with this liquid. So you remove all that glaze that's on there and clean the bottom of your cookware so it's just almost ready to be put in the cupboard. Now it starts to take on another aroma. So we had really clean, focused roasted chicken flavor. Now I smell the roasted chicken, but I also smell the sweetness of the tomatoes. So we're building our sauce. You see how the noise has subsided, calmed down, as I say. We're starting to reglaze the pan. Now we're reglazing it with what we deglazed. We're also glazing it now with the tomato. So we'll have a fortified glaze here. Chicken and tomato. As you know, the tomato will also give it a richer color. That's what tomato does. It also colors it. Gives it that rich brown color. We have the bones, which are going to give it color, and we have the tomatoes, which are going to give it color. So you can see it's already starting to glaze again. You see here on the edge, the sugar in the tomato is also glazing in there. So you see what's going on. I hope. Let me just try to move it over here for you. You see what's going on there? All that glazing, that's what we want. You know what else is a great vegetable to deglaze with is mushrooms. Mushrooms have a lot of water in them. So if we wanted to perfume this with mushrooms, we may be deglazing with mushrooms. We can do mushrooms and tomatoes. Okay. So I'm satisfied that, 80% of that moisture in that tomato is out. We reglazed the bottom of our pan with the chicken and the tomato now. You see our tomatoes almost turned into a tomato paste. Really good. You hardly hear it now. It's very calm. Our second deglazing is going to be with water. We're going to do the same thing. So why wasn't that as violent as the first one? Well, because a lot of the oil that was left in the pan when we drained it, that oil, which reacts really violently with water or moisture, was absorbed by the tomato. So the relevant oil that was in the pan was not there when we added our water, so you didn't hear that violent that you heard with the tomato. So we're going to deglaze, we're going to scrape again, right? We're scraping down. Now the water has helped release not just the tomato, but the chicken. Now the water has also helped to more or less rinse off the bones, so you get a potential for more glazing from the chicken. Again, you see where we've actually really cleaned the bottom of our saucepan here, right? There's no more glaze there, or very little. And the tomato is even more pasty. And what you see now, some skin in there, a few pieces of tomato, but you can see how it's looking, right? And the aroma is even more fortified than the first time. So again, we're continuing to build our flavor profiles here. And you can do with that anything you want. It's really up to you. I've been wanting to split this guy all the time, so there we go. And again, we're going to reglaze. So pay attention. Always pay attention. This does take some time. It takes some awareness. And it takes patience. Our third deglaze is going to be with our light chicken stock. That's why we call it the workhorse. It allows us to contribute a mild flavor of chicken without overwhelming it. Could you use a brown chicken stock with the roasted chicken sauce? Certainly. Could you use a more fortified chicken stock with the brown chicken sauce? Of course you can. We like to keep it a light chicken stock so we can use it for everything that we want. Gives us more options, more alternatives. So we're reglazing again. We are continuously reglazing to deglaze. So once you see it glazing, then and the moisture almost completely gone, that's when you deglaze. Okay. So let me show you. So we're actually reglazing. You see, it's reglazing. You can see here a lot of glazing on in this corner. Let's see if you can see that. A lot of glazing going on in this corner here. Okay. I can remove that by adding some moisture to that through this process. So you see now, we're almost at the point where we're going to deglaze for our third time. There's less relevant oil in here. We got glazing going on here. You see that, right? I can scrape it off, but we're going to let it glaze nicely. And then we're going to do our chicken stock for our third deglaze. A little more chicken stock this time. Okay. So we want to clean all that up, make sure our sides are clean. And so I didn't pour it all in there yet because I want to be able to see what I'm doing, making sure that all the glaze that's on the bottom is now becoming part of the liquid, part of our sauce, right? What's on the side, all these important flavor tidbits here. Now looking at the bottom, you can see how clear, how when I push it back like that, you see the silver, the clean silver bottom. That's a great deglazing job. Okay, you want to make sure that you take your time to make sure you have deglazed that correctly. We're going to add our mirepoix and our bouquet garni. So traditional mirepoix, onions, carrots, leek. Bouquet garni is traditional thyme, bay leaf, garlic, and parsley stems. We're going to go ahead and add the remainder of our chicken stock. And then, of course, the veal stock, which is going to give it the body, reinforce the color, and the flavor from the chicken will now impart into the veal stock and be the flavor of our sauce. Now you can see right away this lighter color on top, which is fat, which we'll skim off as we move along here. Perfect. Again, offset that to the fire so that the heat conducts and pushes all your impurities to one side, which allows you to skim it easier. There you have it, the beginning of our beautiful roasted chicken quick sauce. Our brown roasted chicken sauce is finished. We have a little bit of glaze here on the side of the pan, which I just want to kind of scrape down a little bit, just to make sure I get all those wonderful flavors into there. Sometime I'll take a clean kitchen towel and as well, and kind of, I'll show you this in a minute, but I want to skim first. So you see some of the fat on top. There's not a lot of impurities here. It's mostly fat, and most of that fat is from the oil that we put in the beginning. So we want to get that off of there. Again, we have our water here for our ladle to keep it clean. Just going with the edge of the ladle so slightly just to capture that fat, that oil that's on the top. You see that? Very important. Clean, 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 clean. Now, sometimes we want to leave fat in our sauces. When we do some sauces for our beef dishes, we may want to leave some of that beef fat in there. It's a lot of flavor. The sauce will have an appearance of being separated. In other words, the sauce from the fat. Nonetheless, there's great value in fat, as I hope you are starting to understand. So again, patience in skimming that off. You just want to skim the fat, not the sauce. Again, you see the rolling boil on this side that's forcing everything to the other side. And again, I can just lightly go like this and move it even more. Again, just little by little, little by little, little by little. And we're going to strain this, and then I'm going to make a quick sauce chasseur. Sauce chasseur is a sauce that's a classic French sauce that's made with mushrooms, shallots, white wine, finished with a little bit of tomato concassé or diced tomato, and fresh herbs. Chasseur is a hunter, so it's a hunter's sauce. And it could be used for many different things. It could be made with veal stock. It could be made, of course, we made it with chicken stock this time. So I'm almost there. You can see how clean it's becoming, how reduced the fat is. It takes some time, it takes some patience, but if you want to make great food, this is what you have to do. Especially in stocks and sauces. They are relatively simple, but they do take a time commitment and a dedication. Patience, awareness, and sometimes persistence. Young culinarians ask me all the time if I can give them some words of wisdom, and I always give them two. Patience. Be patient with your career, patient with what you're doing. Don't rush. Enjoy the time that you're doing it. Learn it so that you can teach it. And then persistence. Continue to work at it. But don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do something. You can do anything you want to do. Just be persistent. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Turn off our fire. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to use our spider here to remove the larger pieces, our skimmer. And you'll see some more sauce captured in the bottom here, which we're going to put back inside. Because remember, this is truly valuable stuff. You've spent a lot of time, a lot of effort making your chicken stock, making your veal stock, getting your water from the spigot. Just a lot of effort here. Okay. I'm just going to lift that up and just put that back in there real quick. Okay, and even as it's draining over here, I may come back and get some more. Again, going to our conical strainer, get my larger ladle here, and start to keeping my container close by. Now this is still relatively liquid, so in order to get the viscosity we want, we're going to do one of two things, or sometimes both. We can certainly thicken this sauce with hydrocolloids, something that thickens water. All right, there we go. See how clean the bottom of the sauce pot is? We were very good. And I forgot to show you what I wanted to show you with the kitchen towel, but I'll just show you quickly. You can get your kitchen towel wet, a clean kitchen towel wet, and as it's cooking, you can just kind of clean down and dip in and bring stock up, and you'll deglaze the side of your pan. It wasn't a very good example, but you can do that. Be careful bringing hot stock in and wiping down the side. It's a way of deglazing all those wonderful little flavor bits that are on the side of your pan. I hope that made sense. I apologize for not bringing that up when I told you I would. Okay, so here we go. Again, you see the larger pieces, some mirepoix in there, of course, some bones, some fiber. We're going to get that out. And then we're going to go ahead and chill it down, just to give you an example how to chill something down pretty quickly, is by straining it into a bowl with ice around it. So it's called an ice bath. And you see I've done it in a pitcher or in a measuring cup, which makes it very easy because it has a handle on it. So again, I'm just giving you some flexibility in what you can do and the pieces of tools and equipment that you can use for these things. I can just pat it with my finger instead of the spoon. See, all that fine impurity that you pull out of there. Now, do you have to do that? No, you can leave that in there if you want. It's okay. Just depends on what you want. I like nice, clean, shiny sauces. If we're spending this much time, I want to remove as much impurity as I possibly can. Okay? We can come back in a moment. We see a little fat on there. I can actually show you what I was talking about earlier when we talked about removing fat with a paper towel. So I'm going to let that sit for a minute while I begin my sauce, the sauce chasseur. And then I'll show you with a paper towel how that works. Go ahead and light my fire. Light my fire. I'm going to use a little bit of butter. So a little bit of fresh butter in there. Now, I can modify a little bit the flavor of my sauce by letting that butter brown. Or I can just leave it natural and sweet and start my mushrooms now, which I'm going to do because I want to have the mushroom flavor, not brown butter flavor. Remember, mushrooms are a very high percentage of water. I'm going to add a little salt, and it's going to do two things. It's going to season our mushrooms, as well as help pull out the moisture or the water in the mushroom. A wonderful aroma of mushrooms and butter. Truly, some of the simplest ingredients are some of the most wonderful. Butter and mushrooms, a little bit of garlic or shallots. So in our chasseur sauce, we're going to have shallots, mushrooms, wine, and then we're going to garnish it or finish it with our tomato concassé or chopped tomatoes and our fiends herb chervil, chives, and parsley. I want to bring my butter back over because I always like to finish my sauces with just a little bit of sweet butter. Chester is classically with champignon de Paris, which is a button mushroom as we know it. But I mean, if you want to use a trumpet mushroom or an oyster mushroom or an gnocchi mushroom, I'm sure you could. I'm just preparing a classic traditional French sauce that calls for a champignon de Paris, which is a mushroom from Paris, better known in our country as a button mushroom. Okay, you can see we also have a little glazing going on here from the mushroom water. So I'm going to go ahead and add my shallots. Okay, and let those just sweat just for a moment. I can smell now the mushrooms, the shallots, the butter, and it's actually deglazing. Again, we talk about that, so just something that you can notice. It's something that you've learned. It's deglazed with a little bit of that liquid. I'm going to add some white wine. Now this is, again, a dry white wine, but a wine that is a wine that you would enjoy at your table. It's not cooking wine, although we are cooking with it. Okay? Again, you can see where the bottom of the pan now became very, very clean. Okay, so we'll go ahead and reduce that. So, my chef would always, consommé had to be crystal clear, and if there was just a speck of fat floating on top, we had to get it off. And this was the best way to get it off, is just to lay a towel in there, paper towel in there. You see how it's absorbing. Don't let it go too deep. And just pull it off. And you can see where we're removing some of that fat. So you see even more fat. All right. So we've got even more fat off the top. We'll go ahead and. So you saw the quick way of reducing the temperature of a stock. Yeah, it's not hot, but it's not cold. So I'm gonna reduce my shallots and my mushroom until it's sec or until it's dry, and then we'll go ahead and add our sauce. Now, is this a sauce consistency? No, it needs to be continuous to be reduced to become a sauce consistency. We wanted to take it off of the bones and the mirepoix when we did because we extracted as much flavor out of that as we could. We don't want to cook that down anymore for fear of having even more fiber from the bones and from the mirepoix being in the sauce. As I said, they act as little sponges. So we want to remove that, cooked it for the appropriate amount of time. Okay. Now, as you know, there's no more alcohol left in that wine either. I can stick my nose in there and take a deep breath, and I don't get any burning from alcohol in my nostril. Okay, I can only smell mushrooms, white wine, and the shallots. So we're dry there. Go ahead and should be enough for two. Okay, I'm going to put this back on ice to keep it cooling down. Now I want to taste it. So it's already developed other flavors. So again, we continually building flavors by adding different ingredients, reducing to different levels. Okay. When we're working with reduction, the more surface we have, the faster it's going to reduce. We make a beet sauce at our restaurant. We juice a large quantity of beets, maybe 3 liters of beet juice. And then we'll start with 3 or 4 saucepans on the stove and get them hot. They're probably 12-inch, and add beet juice. And immediately, as soon as it hits the pan, they have this evaporation. So an accelerated reduction process would be achieved by having more surface area. Of course, what you run into the risk of is as you're reducing something small like this, you run into reducing it too quickly, too fast. But when we're doing large quantities of liquid or want to reduce a juice very quickly, we may have 3 or 4 different saucepans of different diameter that the juice is going into at different times and getting a quick reduction. Reduction is something that you can control. Heat, surface, volume. It's starting to get thicker, starting to coat my spoon a little differently. Now, what you can do also is your veal stock, if you want to reduce that by half volume to accelerate this process, that's fine as well. It would be called a demi-glace, which is a half reduced, a half glaze in French. This on a steak, garnishing a roasted chicken with it. I think about when we use sauces, I don't categorize them as this is only for meat and this is only for fish or this is only for vegetables. You know, we are so flexible and so dynamic, and the flavor profiles of a lot of these ingredients really work well together. So don't always think about, wow, it's a brown sauce, it must be for meat. And sauces that are really well made, you don't need a lot of it. It's not like a gravy where you have some mashed potatoes and you make a pool in there and you fill it up with 2 ounces of gravy. That's not what a sauce is like. The sauces are intense. They're made as a garnish for your protein, your vegetables, or your fish. And if they're made well, the intensity of the flavors and the building blocks that you've used to create those flavors are going to be really enough. You don't need a whole lot. Look at that. You see the viscosity, the way it's falling off the spoon now, as opposed to before. I got a nice stream. Turn my heat way down. Finish with a little bit of butter. It'll change it, it'll lighten it up a little bit, makes it a little softer, a little richer in viscosity, a little more luxurious is what I like to say. Beautiful. Oh. And we're going to finish with our garnish. Tomatoes. And then Fiend's herb. And here we go. So just to give you a sense of what it looks like on a plate. Sauce chasseur.